Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for joining us on this week's weekly wrap, Racing FM Live weekly wrap. Full house tonight. We're joined with Dave Massey,
Evening.
James Norris,
Good evening.
Paul Ferguson,
Evening.
and Rory Delagi.
Evening.
What we'll do is we'll start off with the Long Walk Festival, the 2-day meeting at Ascot this week, and we'll start off with the Long Walk itself. Sam Twiston-Davies got a bit of stick on the back of his ride on Zarkanda in the Long Walk. Rory, I'll start with you. Was it a case of horse not helping jockey, but in turn to a point, jockey not helping the horse insofar as we know Zarkanda isn't a bit of a speed merchant and needs to be kept up to his business?
Speed merchant who needs to be kept up to his business is a bit of a contradiction in terms, isn't it?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. I think it was pointed out by it was Ollie Brett of Channel 4 after the event on Saturday that there was a huge amount of abuse for Sam Twiston-Davies after the race, but of that abuse, 50% of it suggested he went too soon, and the other 50% suggested he went too late. So if no one can make up their mind what he did wrong, chances are he didn't do anything wrong.
But when you've looked back at his races and previously, you do see him hit a flat spot. Is it a case of Rev de Civilla is just a bit of a homer when it comes to Ascot? I think it's his third Long Walk now, and he just got a target from Zarkanda, who we all know he's got something between his ears, which he's not going to put it all the way to the line. And
I disagree with that. I don't think that's necessarily. I think yes, he's idled in front, but I'm not sure that you can argue that he's dubious temperamentally from what we've seen of him. He's not. He's a horse who sort of falls between trips, I suppose. He was beaten up over 2 and 2.5 last year, and clearly needs further. And I think he just showed over 3 miles 1 in a genuinely well-run race, which he got with Rev de Civilla and Aubusson taking each other on. But he didn't quite get home. He seemed to stay well enough when well, of course, it was slightly shorter, 2 miles 7.5, isn't it, in the Prix d'Automne. But that wouldn't have been such a strongly run race. Fair enough by French standards, but not as strongly run as 3 miles 1 on softish ground at Ascot, and the extra emphasis on stamina just found him out. And Sam kept a hold of him for as long as he could, and if he'd winged the last, he'd have won the race. As it was, he's landed a bit awkwardly, as is Rev de Civilla at the last, and then he's rallied when he's been caught again. But given that Rev de Civilla has a reputation as a real battler, it did make sense to inject a little bit of pace between the last 2 hurdles to put the race to bed, which it appeared he had. Let's face it, people were backing him at 101 in running, so no one thought Sam had screwed up until the shadow of the post. I see no issue with the race at all. I thought Sam gave Zarkanda a perfectly reasonable ride. I do sometimes query Sam's tactics. I think he can be a little bit keen to press the button at times. I think there are times when you want to hold on to a horse as long as possible, and a few times at Cheltenham this season, he's been keen to sort of press on coming down the hill, which works on the chase course as a rule at Cheltenham, but not so well on the hurdle course. So I don't think he's immune from criticism, but I think he did very little wrong here.
James, we'll go to you for the race itself. And is there anything from those and behind? I'm looking at a possible handicap tilt with Del Arca later in the season. I thought he travelled a lot kinder this time around. I think he's certainly suited more to hurdles than he is to fences. But as a race as a whole, what are your thoughts on Saturday's Long Walk?
Well, I thought it was 3 miles 1, wasn't it? And I thought for 3 miles, Zarkanda looked really, really good and a proper contender for the World Hurdle. And then he just seemed to idle, which I don't think he'd shown before that he was a horse that would throw races away. So I do agree with Rory that it's a bit harsh to criticise Sam, especially against Rev de Civilla, who, as he said, is a battler and loves Ascot and has now won that 3 times. But behind, I wasn't that encouraged with Aubusson. He's probably just a little bit outclassed. He's not up to that, and he was sort of proved that he wasn't up to Grade 1 level, particularly over that trip. Yeah, Del Arca, he does seem like a horse I think he might handicaps with. I agree. unless the spark's gone. But I think he's probably going to. I think he might be a handicap idea over fences. I thought he ran quite well behind Conagry. I definitely think there's a long-term idea there. I'm not sure what it is. I think it could be either over hurdles or fences, but it's definitely one to keep a close eye on wherever he's entered, especially in handicap.
Dave, is there anything which more of that should be worried about while he's getting his wind done?
While he's getting his wind done. Well, there's nothing from here for me. If there's anything from here, it's a be Zarkanda, who, as James has pointed out, for 3 miles and probably half a furlong has travelled like the best horse by a long way in the race, to be quite honest. And as Rory says, if he doesn't bundle the last, he wins. So yeah, it was immediately pointed out. A couple of people pointed out that he doesn't stay. That's just got to be the biggest nonsense ever, hasn't it? He's a head behind here, running at the line behind one of the better stays that we've had in the last few years. He stays fine. He gets 3 miles. He just about gets 3. Well, but I don't really see him as a major threat towards more of that. And more of that on song will still be the one to beat come March.
Paul, on talking about Zarkanda, Dal Jacob did an interview with Racing UK on Friday afternoon, and he turned around and said to Ollie Bell that he never felt as though Zarkanda was ever right last year, that he always felt as though there was some underlying issue which meant that he wasn't able to put his best foot forward. On Saturday, he probably travelled the kindest he's ever travelled for some time, hasn't he?
Yeah, it could be the extra distance that brought that about. I think the lads have covered already. Completely echo what Dave said. Certain people said he didn't really stay, but the way he rallied again once, headed. To be honest, he's never really been, even since his early days in his Triumph Hurdle, he's never really been a horse I've attached myself to. But to step up and trip, yeah, it was no issue. And as he's shown in France, as I say, it's been well covered. I think travelled like the best horse. If he would have jumped the last, yeah, either one. I agree. I think with the Twiston Davis criticism was a little harsh. I think he delivered them. He was still on the bridle between the last two. And you can, as I say, you can't say he didn't stay, because once he was joined, he ran onto the line. So whether it was just a mistake at the last, or I do have a little thing in my head that he has got. He's not completely straightforward, Zarkanda. Always have had that, to be honest. Although I get accused of being a bit of a headgear snob, and it gets blinkers put on, it always puts a little squiggle in my mind. But he should really have won the race. But going forward, he's probably the pick of them. But if I was picking one long term out of it, it'd certainly be Orbison for next year over fences.
Fair enough. We'll stay with you, Paul, because probably one jockey which did deserve criticism, that was Behan's jockey Davy Condon, who pretty much, I think it was 15 hits after he jumped the last when winning the Ladbroke. What did you make of the race as a whole? And I'm not, a few other members on the panel probably have thoughts about the whip issue at large, but do you think it's okay as it is, or do you think a jockey and connections and a horse should be thrown out if they exceed the limits?
It's a tough one, hasn't it? It's been going on for years, that question. And if you look at other sports, if you break the rules, you're sent off in football and you're banned, and then it's tough, isn't it? I've always really sat on the fence on the issue, to be honest. I've never really, but I've just watched the race back again, and I was struggling to make it out how many. But is that what you've said today? Is it 58 to 15 times since the last one? If that's the case, that's quite excessive in the extreme, isn't it? He seems to be getting after him before the turn for home, and I watched it back then. So what did he end up getting? I know Sam got 4 days, didn't he? What did Condon get?
2 weeks ban.
2 weeks ban. Yeah, but the big debate is whether or not he should keep the race, isn't it? But you say, I think that might be for another day. As the race as a whole, I think it was quite strongly run. Watching it back, those who finished towards the fore were quite handy throughout, which usually when it's run so strongly in a handicap like that, it mightn't necessarily be the case. I thought Pine Creek, the runner-up, travelled best for a long way. I know there's talk about him possibly going up to 2.5 for the Coral Cup on better ground. The one I liked, again, I thought Shelford ran a cracker, to be honest. I thought the drop back in trip was probably slightly against him. And again, once he gets an extra half mile, I think he's still progressing nicely. You can always drop back into novice company, but I think he's probably got another handicap in him over 2 mile 4.
Roy, no doubt you have an opinion on this, Roy, for the whip ban. What did you make of the ride on Saturday, and what about the whip rules as a whole?
Yeah, there are various different levels to deal with this on. As ignoring what the whip rules as they stand, if you just watch this race as a race fan and compared to the races, similar races 20 odd years ago, you wouldn't have said it was a brutal ride by David Condon. So, I don't think he's butchered the horse or anything, but he's picked up a 15-day ban for being fined £3,150, which is a pretty serious punishment. But at the end of the day, I think the rules have changed now where you don't simply pick up a ban and indeed a fine your prize money for breaking the rules. Now, if you go above the limits, that triggers an inquiry and it triggers a potential referral. And I think that's a better system. I think there are scenarios where you had to use up your strokes at an early stage of the race. Something may have happened, and then you're riding a horse who's 10 lengths clear on the flat, but then wants to pull itself up without recourse to your whip. I mean, one smack of the whip might be enough to wake a horse up in that scenario and get him to hold on. And if you back that horse, you don't really want to see the jockey just sitting there going, "Well, I can't do anything, can I? I've used up my whip strokes." You want to see horses ridden for the best placing. And again, we've got no concerns about the use of the whip in terms of the welfare of the horse either, with the design of the whip. But where the rules basically say you must fit within this framework, and you're happy to throw them out the window entirely, where you're actually striking the horse twice as many times. It doesn't say in the steward's report how many times he struck the horse. But I've heard either 15 or 16 times. You get a 15-day ban for it. But you get one of these races where a gambling yard has laid a horse out and victory is wanted at all costs. And if the jockey in question gets the horse home and picks up a big ban and a fine, although the rules say that he mustn't be helped out with that, that if a jockey lifts a horse home and an owner lands a massive punt, said owner is going to look after said jockey in some way. And I think if you're breaking the rules to the extent that David Condon did break the rules, then you probably... I would allow the result to stand for betting purposes, personally. I think punters need to be able to bet knowing they've got a level playing field and that the result's going to stand. But I think, like doping inquiries, I think you need to look at it after the event. And if you find that the jockey has needlessly broken the rules and broken the rules specifically to make sure that he won against the jockey on the second who stayed within the rules and beaten a short head, then the winner needs to be disqualified after the event.
Good shout. Very good idea. James, on Activial and Harry Fry, and to a certain point, Dan Skelton as well, they certainly know the time of day when it comes to not only their handicappers but even their leading lights. Like, for instance, Harry Fry, he knew that 137 or the mark which Activial had at the time, knew that it was perfect for a good handicap pot along these lines, and pretty much Dan Skelton did himself with the likes of Shelford winning the Silver Cup, coming on to here with a novice, and he did last year with Willow Saviour when he won this last year. What were your thoughts about the race, and what are your impressions of the two stables this year and going forward?
Well, I think they're two very, very smart trainers, aren't they? They're going to be hugely successful in years to come. But as in the race as a whole, I agree with Paul. I thought Shelford was the one to take out of it. Most of all, given he sort of tried to carry on Balgary's suicidal pace. Given he knows he stays further and he couldn't quite manage it, but he's finished pretty well given how tired he probably was. And I imagine they'll probably go Betfair Hurdle, and most of them will probably go Betfair Hurdle next, and then with Shelford's ability to stay further, I suspect the Coral Cup will be his long-term aim. Activity ran well as well, and I think you probably look at the race and quite easily look at the first four and think, had things panned out slightly differently, any of them could have won. But with Gardner Victoire in fifth, probably running his race, I think the form is really, really solid. But yeah, I think Shelford is the one to look out for up in Trip again.
Dave, any thoughts on the Rip debate? And we'll go on to a horse who was disqualified after the event in the Young Master and his performance in the listed handicap chase.
Well, I think, funnily enough, there was a horse running today at Bangor who a couple of years ago, actually 3 years ago, Richard, 3 years ago on New Year's Eve, sparked a bit of a debate about the whip at the time. If you remember the Elton Fox winning at Uttoxeter when he beat Avenging Ace by a length, and at the time it was when the whip rules were very much black and white. You could only hit your horse X times, anything more than that. And if you remember the £7 claim on board that day, I think it's Robert Cooper was claiming 7, riding for John Needham.
That's right.
It's Robert Cooper, sorry, and he ended up getting a 52-day ban for hitting the horse 23 times. Now, that sounds horrendous, but when you watch the race back, so many of those 23 were literally flicks, a flick, to keep the horse's momentum in what was dreadful ground. He wasn't in any way punishing the horse. Now, the question for me remains, and if we're going to have, a sensible debate on the whip and talk of throwing horses out, what counts as a whip stroke, what doesn't count as a whip stroke? Does a flick down the front count as a whip stroke? What counts? And until you can
There is a definition for that, by the way.
Yeah, go on then.
A flick down the neck. If you're gonna flick the horse down the neck, you're allowed to, only in the backhand position, and you're meant to keep your hand on the rein at the time. So jockeys still do it. They just keep flicking the horse down the neck, as long as they're in contact with the rein. So the right hand, if they're using the right hand, they've partly got the rein in there, and they're just flicking the whip. That's fine. What Mr. Cooper was doing, he was doing what amateur jockeys have done for centuries. Took his hand off the rein and flicked the horse down the shoulder in the forehand position or the backhand position, which you can't do anymore essentially. Or you can, but it's deemed to be as serious a strike as a full-blown Luke Morris drop behind the saddle. Apologies for a minute.
That's what they were.
Luke Morris won't be wanting to talk to you ever again, will he?
No, he won't. But that's not really it.
And so I'll give a quick mention to one in the Ladbroke that I thought ran an absolute cracker actually for a horse that's dreadfully inexperienced, and I often get crabbed by Mr. Delargy for slagging Chris Gordon off. I thought Jabril ran a stormer. He was 3 lengths off and 3.5 lengths off turning in, went the inside route, and only really sort of played came with a chance 2 out, and then sort of got a bit tired. For a horse that was very inexperienced, only had 3 runs. He was, 75 races on the flat for Johnny Portman. Probably some more in him yet. There might be a nice race to be won with Jabril. He probably didn't get the credit he deserved now, looking back. Finishing second to Jolly's Cracked It when he split Jolly's Cracked It in Clondell Banker. And he probably didn't get the credit for that. So there's probably a nice prize in Jabril somewhere along the way.
I agree on Jabril because the rules of the race on to qualify for it, and I think the 7th of December was the last day for qualification purposes. I think looking at the way he jumped at Ascot to a point and at Huntingdon, he'd probably benefit from a bit more schooling. I think it was just a case that they've always probably looked at this race with the run behind Jolly's Cracked It. And yeah, I agree that by schooling him a bit, I think he's going to have a nice handicap off him. Winning off him, I think mid 120s or something, isn't it?
Yeah, 127, I think he is. Yeah.
Well, like say what we said earlier about a horse which is disqualified at a later date. Dave will stay with you. Is the Young Master a possible RSA or Formala type in a handicapper?
Yes, he is, isn't he? He's just the sort of improving horse that you want this time of the season. He looks an RSA type, doesn't he? He's already shown that he's quite at home at Cheltenham when he beat Charringworth there back in October. So no problems at all as far as the track goes. Seems to have no problem at all with any sort of ground. jumped well, stays well, has beaten a really useful yardstick in Houblon des Obeaux here. What's not to like, really? Yeah, I would go at this stage. I mean, he's not a million miles off, is he, from what you'd expect in RSA standards? So I would go RSA with him personally. I don't think he's I'm not saying not a 4 mile type, but you got a chance of a decent pot like of the RSA in one of the big races, and you take it, don't you? So yes, he is. I think he's an RSA type.
Roy, the young master, 16-1 for the RSA. Is it worthy of consideration, or do you think he's just had the ability to show his hand, whereas the others will do that at a later date?
Yeah, that's a very good point you make, that opportunity is an important thing to bear in mind. That a lot of horses going into the festival will be about to show their best form. We have this debate every year about horses who come there with the highest rating, and horses who have earned a rating good enough to win most renewals of the Champion Hurdle or the Supreme Novices or whatever it happens to be. And the reason these horses have gained such big ratings is because they've had the opportunity to show themselves off to full effect. And that's definitely true of the young master. If you're running in handicaps, especially listed handicaps like the like Saturday's FQB or Mappin and Webb Silver Cup, as it's better known these days, then you're going to show yourself off to the best of your ability, and there will be horses you meet who you'll be rated better than, who will then be improving at that stage. He's only a 5-year-old, and he's got a bizarre pedigree, the young master. It's very hard to read, in that he's by a Godolphin miler, Echo of Light, out of a 5 furlong winner. So he really shouldn't be making a chaser at all. And I think he's the first chase winner of his sire. So difficult getting it. He's a good looker though. I mean, he looks like a useful chaser. There's nothing freaky about him in that regard. So all options are open to him. He's one off mark 144. Do we know? Or you have we won't know what he's rated after that until Tuesday. But it's going to go up another 7, 8 points for that. You'd have thought. Beating the head up Houblon des Obeaux. I didn't think Houblon des Obeaux got much of a ride, to be honest. Big fan of Aidan Coleman, and he doesn't often do an awful lot wrong. But I thought it wasn't his finest hour in Houblon des Obeaux, keeping him very wide in the race. And how much the young master had in hand, we don't know because he wasn't challenged. The runner-up was just closing him down after the last, but never got close enough to him to see whether he'd have picked up again. When he comes into the picture for an RSA, everything he might go for now, you'll scratch your head and go, surely not, but he's proved the drivers wrong already, including myself. And it's interesting that whenever Neil Mulholland gets a good chaser, he knows how to get the best out of them. Look at Midnight Chase a few years ago. He came from nowhere. I remember him lining up in the Martin Pipe and finishing 4th at 100-1, completely unconsidered for that, sneaking to the bottom of the waist, and then he was a Gold Cup horse 2 years later. So Mr. Mulholland knows how to get a horse to perform at Cheltenham, particularly. His strike rate at Cheltenham with chasers is absolutely frightening, very, very good indeed. So he'd have no fears going back that way, and the fact that he jumped out to his left occasionally and ran wide on the bends suggested that he'd be at least as happy going left-handed again. So it's hard to tell what his limit might be.
Where would you go with Houblon des Obeaux? I think he's about 160 now. Is there anywhere he's probably shy of Gold Cup class, or would you?
Well, he's not
be afraid to give him another shot?
Gold Cup class, but he's never looked particularly effective at Cheltenham. He's made mistakes at Cheltenham before, and he's been found out there. He's won again. He's not the easiest in the world to place. You'd go for, I suppose they'd run him in. We give him a go at Cheltenham back in the Gospel Chase.
Yeah.
Because he's not far below the very best, and time will tell that trying to give it chunks of weight away to Many Clouds in the Hennessy was a tremendous achievement. Although it may take Many Clouds a season to get over that run. And it's also interesting that a lot of horses struggle to bounce straight back from a Hennessy run, and Houblon des Obeaux's done it twice. You'd get the impression we're going to see the best of him in the middle of the winter. And what is the Eichford Diamond Chase at Sandown these days? It was, of course, the It was the Mildmay Memorial, wasn't it, back in the day? That'd be an ideal race for him. Bad ground, right-handed track. He doesn't need to go right-handed as he showed in Newbury, but he's very effective that way. And given that, and they might want to have a go at the Gold Cup, but I think his cards are marked in that regard. He'd be better off trying to find a big pot between now and Cheltenham.
Paul, we'll go to you and we'll start on the novice chases over the 2 days. We had Joss's Hill Petite Sig on the Friday, and we had Irish Saint until Puff and Billy clattered and went skyrocketing out at the last in the novices chase on the Saturday. What did you make of those two performances, and is there anything which we should be looking at, not only from Cheltenham point of view, but elsewhere in relation to Aintree?
Yeah, possibly. I thought Friday's race is probably the stronger of the two. I know a few people seem to crab the Jason debut onto Joss's Hill, but I thought it was a fair effort, to be honest. He didn't jump particularly well early on. He was sticky and a bit slow. He clearly needed the run. They didn't try and hide that. They were evident saying that everyone knows he had an issue with his splint earlier in the year, and I think looking at it, possibly maybe was he rushed on the schooling grounds, as he certainly looks like he could do with a couple more sessions before he goes out for his next start. But the fact that he did jump a bit steep at a couple and clobbered a couple down the side of the course, the fact that he could still come back, come there travelling on the bridle turning for him, I thought was a huge positive from Joss's Hill. Petite Sig, on the other hand, he jumped particularly well, which is in contrast to what Paul Nicholls said earlier in the year before he made his debut at Exeter. He was concerned and said it took him quite a while to get him schooled, and he wasn't a natural apparently, but he won there, and then he won at Warwick a few days later. But I thought that was his best round on Friday. He didn't do little wrong, and we were talking off air before, and I thought it was a slight overreaction to push Joss's Hill out from around 8 to 1 to 16 to 1 for the Arkle. And for me, he's probably the brightest UK hope over 2 miles. I think Petite Sig will be better, certainly in the spring, around 2.5. But as you alluded to there again, he could possibly, if they wanted to skip Cheltenham, he could be possibly one for the 2.5 around Aintree. Ran reasonably well in the Aintree hurdle, slightly outclassed last year, but as good as he was over hurdles, he looks like making up into a high-class novice. Saturday's race, I'd say Petite Sig was rated higher in the Nicholls camp over the intermediate trips than Irish Saint personally. I wasn't totally convinced by Irish Saint prior to Saturday. He jumped well. Certainly jumping won the race. Puff and Billy's jumping went to pot somewhat before his fall compared to how he jumped last time around Ascot. Obviously, now he loves the track, but he made a few errors before coming down, and it was a bit of a horrendous fall in the end. Not sure how much there was in behind, but Irish Saint could do no more than win the race. But I think Puff and Billy he'd certainly lost his race with his errors down the back, and it was just pleasing to see him get up in the end, because it was a bit of a horrendous fall, and we know that owners suffered a bit of bad luck, not a bit of bad luck, a lot of bad luck in recent times, so it was nice to see Puff and Billy get back up, but I still think Irish Saints needs to step up if he's going to be considered the type for the JLT personally.
James, would any of the performances at the weekend, were Willie Mullins considering how undersold it on Saturday at Fairyhouse?
No, because I assume Understow is an Arkle horse, and that's always going to be this season. Because Joss's Hill probably wouldn't have scared him, but I think he's got so much more to come, as Paul was saying. He certainly needed the race. He could have looked better in his skin beforehand, I thought, being there, and he was very, very buzzy, and before the race and during the race, and Garrity was at pains to sort of settle him. I think he could be one of the sort of most serious threats of Ireland in the Arkle, but they're not too worried at this stage. Whereas I think Petite Sig is a serious threat to whatever he runs in the JLT. I thought it was excellent. He's been campaigned really well. Sort of with doubts about his jumping, he's found 2 easy starts, and he's looked a bit sort of careful. But on Saturday, on Friday, he was nimble and quick, and it was a really impressive performance. And on paper, I suspect you're going to struggle to find much stronger form this side of the festival in terms of sort of middle distance novice chase races. Irish Saint I wasn't not so convinced about, and he'll probably be Nick Schofield's ride in the GLT as a sort of second string. But I suspect he'll go 3 miles at Aintree or next season, and that's probably where he's going to be seen at his best.
Dave, are we looking at the novice handicap chase for Thomas Clapper? 140, not the 140, not the 145?
Yeah, maybe. I'd rather see him put away now. I'd rather see him come back fresh for the spring. I don't think he's enjoying this winter ground as much. I think he's better on spring ground. If that's the way that you wanted to go with him, Dan, if that's sort of the way that you're thinking, I just want to see him put away now. Come back fresh for Cheltenham. Would be the way I would play it with him. I thought the one to take out of the race, with the exception of those two, I thought Drop Out Joe again dropped a massive hint for the 4 miler. I think he's becoming better for the second time. In a good chase, outpaced, stayed on again really late in the contest. I think it'll be a very interesting one in the 4 miler in the festival.
He jumped very well, but he jumped slightly to his left as well, didn't he?
Be better, exactly. Be better going back round again left-handed, yeah.
Matthew, jumping left is not always a sign that you want to go left.
No, I know. We were discussing this the other day, weren't we? About sometimes horses want space at a fence. It's not always the case, but I think it is in this case, Rory. I think it is in this case.
I made the point.
Well, we'll stay with you. James made a point there about James and Paul about Petit Zig not being the most fluent of jumpers in the school and work according to Paul Nichols. Is it testimony to his style of training that he's happy to send him to Exeter, then backed it up quickly with Warwick, which we know Warwick's a bit of a jumping test, and then again send him to Ascot, which either makes a man out of him or puts him possibly on the deck?
Are you asking if that's a masterclass in training?
No, is it just another way of doing things rather than just doing half-speed schooling at home?
Yeah, I think if you're able to get the experience with a novice chaser, it's hugely important. There aren't too many who turn up for races like the Arkle or the RSA on the back of 1 or 2 runs. It's one thing with classic aspirants or bumper horses or even horses for the Supreme or the Neptune that you give them a couple of runs and expect that to be enough. Chasing's a different kettle of fish. Most horses take time to work out what it's all about, either just in terms of technique or the combination of technique while dealing with that in a biggish field. So I think I'd like to see more horses campaign the way Paul Nichols has campaigned Petit Zig. 3 runs have come in small fields so far. So I wouldn't mind seeing him in a bigger field at some stage. But he's learned by the run, and that's what most novice chasers do. So each run, I think he's stepped up. I suppose arguably the extra form looks slightly better on paper than Warwick, but the nature of the fences of Warwick teach horses about being able to get into rhythm, and you've got those 7 fences down the far side that you've got to get in a jumping rhythm. You've got to deal with that. And I think he's learned different lessons every time he's been on the course. So for me, it's common sense, but it's not common sense enough for most people to try it. So yeah, hats off to Paul Nichols for that. I'll touch on the point that Dave made. Paul was saying he's not sure what was in behind at Ascot, but again, Dave was talking about sorry, not in the Petit Zig race, but in the Irish Saints race. I think that's a decent race. Again, we touched on Dropout Joe. We touched on Thomas Cramper. I think everything. Grand Vision looked like he was going to let the winner when he fell in his reappearance. Ran a very good race as well. I think despite the small field, I think there's a lot of depth in that race, and I think it's easy to assume in a small field for 1 or 2 dominate that there might not have been much behind, but it's always worth looking at them individually. And I think that was a race with depth, and I like all of the 3 in behind to varying degrees. I've always had Thomas Cramper in my mind as one for a festival handicap. My worry with him at the weekend was that Robin Dickon might ruin his mark if he ran the race of his life and finished won or finished a close second. that'll be a decent handicap mark for him. But the way where he finished means that he probably hasn't stepped up markedly in what he did before. He's just the type to improve on good ground at the festival. He ran an absolutely monstrous race in the Martin Pipe. I think in various quarters his jockey was praised for an enterprising ride. I thought it was the worst ride of the entire festival. In fairness, he's a £7 claimer and he's likely to do that. But he asked the horse to do a hell of a lot, travelling widest of all, past the entire field in a quarter of a mile, and then got tired from between the last two and finished second. I thought he would have won that race with a more measured ride. And I think he's a horse that we haven't seen the best of. He needs good or good to soft ground at worst. As Dave said, he doesn't want to be slogging around on soft ground. But I'd like to see him back in a handicap against more experienced horses, maybe at Kempton in February. And I think he's an absolutely cracking bet for the festival plate.
There you go. You heard it here first. James, what we'll do is start with you, because you were there at Ascot on the Friday. Obviously, you've got your Supreme Novice Hurdle blog. What did you make of the Kennelgate, the Grade 2 on the card? Obviously, emerging talent falling before it really got into a race, probably a disappointment on that front. But also, your thoughts on the bumper on the card, where Andrew Baldwin pretty much is showing these National Hunt forms how to do it.
Yeah, well, the Kennelgate, I thought we didn't learn a lot, to be honest, about Lamy Serge. He sort of cruised around similar to in the Jerry Field, and this big danger fell before he could offer him a test, which is a shame. But he's done it easily, and Nicky Henderson's come out and said he's probably a 2-miler, and the Supreme is where he's going. I still think he'd be better in the Neptune. I think he takes a bit of air at his hurdles, and I'm not convinced he's all about speed, but he's probably our leading contender now. Although I wasn't convinced about Kilelta Vic beforehand. He wasn't particularly impressive to look at, and he probably needs further and softer ground. So I'm not sure you can judge Lamy Serge too harshly on that performance, or too positively, to be honest. But he's done nothing to dampen your enthusiasm, I suppose, if you are a fan. The bumper I really, really enjoyed. I thought it was a really hot race. The winner, Super Sunday, he had a bit of class in the paddock beforehand. He looked particularly good, but I thought that's probably more down to his breeding than he was going to come out and beat that field. But he did it really well, and I think beating Yanworth is going to prove extremely, extremely strong form. And wherever Yanworth goes, even though he got beaten, I think he'll be very difficult to. It'll be a tough nut to crack, because he was a little bit keen to start with. He'd probably appreciate faster pace, maybe a sounder surface. And he drew a long way clear of the third, who was the Mullins runner, who also ran particularly well, given her size, she's absolutely tiny. But yeah, Yanworth, he looks ready right now, and I think the next couple of seasons are when you're going to see him at his best. And I'd already marked him out as a horse for next year's Supreme. I think he's the ideal for the race. And then behind, I thought Stonegate was probably the best looking horse in the race. He's a great big chaser, looks like a chaser, but his full brother Megastar didn't like chasing, so maybe a bit too hasty before that. He balled over beforehand, I thought. So it's just a very quick line through. But I'm sure he's a decent horse, given the way he won at Sandown and how he looked on Friday. And the last one I'd probably take from the race would be Thistlecrack, Tizard horse, because they definitely raised him. But he didn't look particularly fit for that way, and yet he still managed to beat a lot of the field. I heard recently Joe Tizard say they're in good form in the yard and they wanted to run everything, and I suspect they've run him there because they could, probably before he was ready. So I think he might be one to look out for. He's going to stay back in practice. He'll have to go for the big ones into the season. I imagine massive fight, maybe longer term. Keep an eye on.
Paul, go to you next. What about anywhere else on Friday at the Ascot card, or anywhere else in recent days' performances which have taken you out?
I think James covered the bumper well there. I thought front two. I think while the Mullins filly's probably not top of his pecking order, she looked the time before, and though she beat that day's come out and win over the hurdles, and so I think she gives the form some substance. And in behind, I'd just point out, I thought Simon Swiddle travelled well for a long way, and James said to me from the paddock he thought he'd come on for the run, so He's another maybe to keep an eye on. Elsewhere last week, I thought Value at Risk really impressed on hurdles there with Newbury, high class bumper horse in Ireland. Excuse me, for Philip Fenton before joining Dan Skelton. Did a little wrong, and he now goes to the Neptune trial, I think, on trials day before a possible tilt at the Albert Bartlett. And he's got plenty of stamina on the dam side, and I think you'll see he certainly didn't look short of pace on Wednesday, but I think he'll improve again when going up in trip. He's certainly one of the better novices I've seen this season. And the two bump horses that Willie Mullins won with at the weekend, Stonehard on Saturday and Pile Under Pressure at Thales yesterday, were both particularly impressive. Jamie Codd brought Stonehard to my attention when interviewing him for Jumpers to Follow. You could tell in his voice that he thought this one was particularly nice out of the horse he won on in last season, point to point, and he was an impressive winner. The one that won yesterday, Pile Under Pressure, he won his point to point, beating a horse called Cracked Rearview that came out and won a bumper and has since joined Donald McCain for 130 grand, I think, for Paul Rooney. So possibly another sort of how far he looked good yesterday, because Patrick went about 8 wide on him and he still come there cancelling.
Rory, I know from listening to the Final Furlong podcast, you actually liked Value at Risk's performance at Newbury. Now we know he's never failed a test, so that's good. What do you think he can do in the future in the UK?
He looks a bit of a monster. As Paul said, he didn't look short of pace, but he didn't win through speed at Newbury. He just found it easy getting to the front, and he didn't get them off the bridle early. It was only there were several horses snapping at his heels, those immediately behind him in the market. At the second last hurdle, it looked like he might be in trouble, but, well, it didn't really look like he was in trouble, but it looked like it might be a reasonably close run thing. And despite making a mistake at the last, it was pretty much his only mistake of the round, and then being eased in the run, and he just pulled further and further clear. And for a horse being eased down to pull clear suggests there's an awful lot of untapped reserves there. His dam Miss Orchestra stayed extremely well. She won the Midlands National, didn't she? And she's produced Battle Cry, who was second in an RSA. He's clearly going to stay all day. He's also going to be an absolutely top-notch staying chaser. He's got a terrific build, really strong, big and scopy. But clearly he's going to be a big talent over hurdles. They're more likely to go Albert Bartlett, I suppose, than Neptune. But he wouldn't be out of place in the Neptune at all. The more you look at that performance, and it may well be that it wasn't the strongest novice you'll see at Newbury, but Newbury novices tend to be well-contested events, and he was just a stunningly impressive winner. So I definitely keep him on side. And again, others who caught the eye, again make the point, that bumper at Ascot looked a really strong race on paper. There was one horse I had in my tracker prior to that. I'm not a big one for the tracker, so when one of them pops up, which is about once a year, I still haven't taken notice. And I'd made a mental note to back Final Nudge in a bumper because he'd run really well to split subsequent winners on his bumper debut. He had one run in a point-to-point and fell in front. And kept on really well to be second to Definitely Red, like you talked on his bumper debut. And I said, it's an absolute certainty for one of these. I must remember to back him when I see him in one. And then Salt Lloyd turns out in a listed event instead, which didn't give him a great chance of winning, but I thought he shaped very well in fourth. He's a horse who will stay 2.5 miles and beyond over hurdles. Despite falling on that point, you get the impression he will only come into his own when jumping a hurdle. And given that David Dennis is not exactly a household name at the moment, I think you get a price about him when he does decide to take that route. And again, it has to be pointed out that Super Sunday might still be underrated coming out of this because of that SP set up at 16-1. Because I'm guessing Andrew Balding and Andrew Balding's connections don't tend to back their horses at all, so they tend not to be the ones that there's early market moves for, and then everyone assumes that the early movers are the ones to be interested in. Super Sonny's got an absolutely fantastic pedigree. Costs very little, but by Galileo, out of a well-related daughter of Magnificent Style, who was an absolutely top-notch mile and a quarter, mile and a half filly back in the day. She won the Yorkshire Oaks. Magnificent Style. I mean, she was very, very good indeed, and she produced a hatful of group winners in the flat. And obviously, she's also the dam of percussionist. So the dam's a half-sister percussionist. You can't say as much wrong with the sire side of her pedigree being by Galileo, and she just passed people by at the sales. It's frightening to think that she ended up with Tim Fitzgerald for £5,000, but her new owners picked up a bargain with her. She was full value for the beating she gave to Yanworth, who's clearly a decent prospect as well. I think this is a race that's bound to throw up an absolute hatful of winners. But the winner and the fourth would be the two that I take out of the race.
And Dave, what about you? Was there any performances from last week which took your eye and swiftly being put in the notebook?
Yeah, I just want to give a mention really to the opening novices handicap at Ascot on the Saturday. First four home, Flintham, the Tour Odd Man, Spooky Dookie and Rascal will all be winning more handicaps this season. I thought that was the right four horses have finished 1, 2, 3, 4, very, very solid piece of form. Flintham's starting to look a bit more like the finished article now. Always thought he might be, thrown him a couple of times in the flesh. And this step up in trips really suited him. He's very game, he's very genuine, he takes an awful lot of passing and they haven't got anywhere near the bottom of him yet. Tour Odd Man came into it as the form horse and you can base the form around him. He won a perfectly solid race. The interesting one again is a horse that I've mentioned before, but Spooky Dookie again, from John Joe O'Neill's. He wasn't particularly strong in the market beforehand and was held up out the back for much of the contest. Once he was put into it, his hurdling technique let him down rather, but he stuck on perfectly well enough to finish third. And given the form of John Joe's now, he still hasn't had, I think it's well over 4 winners now, since 4 weeks I should say, since he's had a winner. And very, very few from the yard are running anything like their races. And given that, I think there's still an awful lot more to come from Spooky Dookie. A really nice looking horse who will want a fence next season. He'll definitely want a fence next season. I think he will be one that you want to be watching certainly long term.
Cheers, Dave. What we're going to do now is we're going to have a quick look at the big 3 races on the Kempton Boxing Day card. Obviously the King George, the Feltham and the Christmas Hurdle. James, we'll start with you on the Feltham chase. Obviously you've got Carbon Ambitions, I would say Ambition with Sophia Duray. He's been priced up 11 to 8 by Paddy Power. Do you think that's a fair reflection of his chances in this 7 or 8 winner entry stage?
I think it probably is. I think he's been nearly the most impressive staying novice I've seen this season, maybe apart from King's Palace, but King's Palace isn't there. I expect him to probably start short on that on the day. I think that the rest have got a few doubts about them, whether So Sweet to Sunrise will recover in time after getting flanked by King's Palace again. If he does, I think probably most likely second. Very full, Only agrees beat Delarka, but Delarka's not done a lot for the form. Whether that's been how intentional that's been, since I'm not sure. But, he did idle anyway up the straight, and so probably better than he looked. But I still struggle to see him beating stuff in a row if he's on form. I just think he's got up there the best novice chases at any distance so far this season.
Paul, I know there's a couple of decent horses which you've followed this season. I think we were both excited by Carrickmore when he performed on his hurdles debut at Utox, and it was definitely a bit more like himself last time out. Do you give him a chance in this race, or is it pretty much the Nichols bandwagon?
He's obviously got a chance. I think he didn't quite go on last year. The wheels came off a little bit, sadly. But he got back on track last time. Looks as though going right-handed will suit him. James pretty much covered it well there. I think Safford Roy is probably a worthy market leader, but wasn't too excited by the entries, to be honest. I'd actually hoped that Willie Mullins might have considered bringing Valser Lido over, given his record right-handed. I actually think the best novice chaser on the card might be running a novice handicap chase, Stellar Notion. I think he's only gone up £9 since Leicester, and his entry caught my eye more than the Feltham, to be honest.
Rory, yourself, is it pretty much clean sweep for Sophia Duray?
No, someone's got to stand up to Safra Giroux. He wouldn't have beaten Honeybury at Newbury. You know, if he'd stayed on his feet that day rather than unseating Sam Kirsten Davis, he would have come off second best at Honeybury. So why shouldn't Honeybury be favourite for this? That's what I say. We all want to see the Bradstocks having a rant on the telly again. And it'll make Christmas.
It'll make Christmas, wouldn't it?
But in fairness, Honeybury is as exciting a chasing prospect as we've seen in these shows this season. My impression with him immediately was, and Mark Bradstock said it after that Newbury win, was that his immediate target is almost next year's Hennessy, and whatever he's doing between now and then is the sort of marking time. Whether he would be happy at a track like Kempton is open to debate. But unlike David was talking about Feltham earlier on, he's another half brother. Conagry is slightly different from the rest of the family. It's the family of Carruthers, in that he actually looks a chaser. Carruthers is not the biggest for the job that he's been doing. Conagry, who's by Coringa Bay, the others are by Cave Tara, aren't they? Really does look a proper chaser and was tremendously impressive in the way he went about things in Newbury. Again, I know it's a smallish field. It was over 2.5 miles. He'd improved for 3 miles. He's shown his form at Cheltenham before, but that's because they were happy to throw him into graded company fairly early over hurdles. He'd only won a maiden or a novice at Uttoxeter before, winning a grade 2 at the open meeting at Cheltenham as a novice hurdler. So we don't know whether that kind of track suits him better, or whether he's just the perfect chaser, essentially. Mark Bradstock's always thought so. I guess the Bradstocks are keener to top up their horses than 1 or 2 trainers, but he's done very, very little wrong in his career. It's all his wins have been or his runs have been on soft ground so far, and you wonder how he would cope with slightly better. But it wasn't top deep at Newbury. I mean, that was the most impressive thing he's ever done. It was just on a slightly easier than good to soft. I think he'd be okay in good to soft ground. And he might just be underrated there. He's certainly got gears. There's no doubt about that.
I think connections from day one have always said that they've always held him in a higher opinion than Carruthers.
They always thought he's better than Carruthers, and you took that with a pinch of salt for a while. But the more, he achieved more than Carruthers from an early stage. Most of the family have won first time out, oddly enough, given the pedigree. And I think Fagmate herself came to hand fairly early for a stayer. But the more you see it, the more you think that Mark and Sarah Bradstock might be absolutely spot on.
And Dave, what Conagry is going to do from the off is pretty much test everyone else's jumping, which Sophia Duray found out at Newbury. Would you be giving Conagry a chance to get his head in front again here in the Feltham?
Yeah, well, if we wind back just over 12 months down, I think you and I were doing a 5 to follow at Cheltenham. I think Roy was there as well, and we rolled in our 5 to camera, and I put Conagry up as one of my 5 to follow for that season. There seems to be a bit of a pattern with my 5 to follows. Don't back them that season, back them the season after. It's dead easy. That's all you do with mine. Ignore them that season and then start backing them the season after. So I've always been a Conagry fan. Always been a big Conagry fan. Obviously, saw him a couple of times that he tops to early in his career. I have the same slight query as Rory has as to whether Kempton is going to be his track. On saying that, you are absolutely right what you say. He will put them to the sword early, and any jumping frailties with them, and there are jumping frailties in this field, are going to get found out. So listen, there'll be nobody cheering him home louder than myself.
And Dave, staying with you and jumping frailties, Faugheen seems to be, well, his best novice performance over hurdles was when he dropped back to 2 miles at Punchestown Festival. What are your thoughts of him in a Grade 1 company over 2 miles in the Christmas Hurdle at Kempton on Boxing Day?
I think he will win. I think he'll have too much speed, and I think he'll have too much class. This is a speed race, and I think he's going to have these pretty much on the stretch from in the straight. I would say they're all going to be queuing up. They're all going to try and come and have a go, and I don't think they'll get near him. I don't think they'll get near him to have enough to sort of unleash the speed that they have. I just think he's going to be far too good for this lot. It's nice to see Blue Heron take his chance. He's a horse that I like an awful lot. I don't think he's going to get involved here. He might be able to pick up the pieces for the places, but he's very much a horse that's underrated. I like him an awful lot. Irving Jew's still out with me. I don't know whether he's just. I don't want to use the word inconsistent because that's a stupid word to use for a horse that wins as often as he does, but I think he's as liable to throw a bad one in as he is a good one. There's a horse missing from here, actually, from this lineup. A horse that I was quite looking forward to seeing how he went on. And it's a horse I'm sure you'll be interested in, Dan, as well. I really thought Nick Williams might have a go and pick up some prize money with a Moray Lato. Rather, he's gone with Hint of Mint, which is a bit of a surprise. If you'd have put a Moray Lato in here, I could have easily seen him in the 3. I really could. He's trying to give a stone to no card, them out, done perfectly well. Won the novice hurdle on this card last year. No fluke. Beat Vanity, beat Sergeant Reckless. For me, he'd have been in the 3. I think they've missed a bit of a trick not putting him in it.
I think you agree there, especially with more than likely being able to get an easy lead as well on that front. And Paul, will come to you. Jim, Dave mentioned there about it's going to be a speed test. Sign of a Victory is a bit nippy, isn't he?
Yeah, I'd back him in a match bet to beat Irvine on Friday. What day are we? Let's get mixed up with the days of Christmas Friday. Yeah, he's the one who interests me without. I think it's obviously the most likely winner and really hard to beat, especially considering Sign of a Victory won a handicap of 139 last time. But the drying ground's in his favour. I think the track is in his favour, especially if 14 goes off from the front. I'm quite looking forward to seeing him, to be honest. I think the conditions of the race will suit him. The field looks like cutting up, or either in the market without the favourite or in a match bet with Irvine. I'd personally rather be with Sign of a Victory. The one entry I was surprised with was Sergeant Reckless, to be honest. I'm pretty sure. Surely they'll have entered him in the Wayward Lad the following day today, wouldn't it? It's been reopened, I see, but I would have thought that was the race to go with him. I was trying to look at possible horses that won't run to see how many we'll end up with, but I would have preferred to see Sergeant Reckless go for the Wayward Lad on the following day.
James, obviously Sergeant Reckless finished decent 4th in the Supreme last year, and one that disappointed was Irving. On Irving's chances, do you think the noseband, the extra schooling, Nick Schofield back in the plane is going to help him try and lower Faugheen's colours, or is it pretty much Faugheen the machine?
I think Faugheen's going to win, but that's not difficult to say, is it? But I think it will be enough to help him beat Sign of a Victory. I disagree with Paul. I think he can do it. I think his best performance last year was at Kempton. And he won the Dovecote so impressively. And I think he'll probably come second. I think that's the most interesting part of the race. Probably he'll come second because it should be a good battle between at least 13 and Sign of a Victory and possibly Purple Bay. And the other interesting thing is how Ruby will ride for Faugheen, because I'm sure he'll go off to the front. And I wonder whether he'll try and do it at Ascot and let them come to him and quicken away, or whether he'll try and stretch them early and win by miles. Whichever way, it should be fun to watch.
Rory, how would you ride Faugheen?
Again, I get the impression that connections are keen to put Faugheen among other rivals at some stage of his races so that he can learn to jump hurdles at speed and alongside similar horses of similar ability. One thing about bombing off in front here is that if he destroys him from the front, he won't learn an awful lot. And I don't think they would try to do that with Champion Hurdle. So I think he's not going to be ridden negatively, but I think he'll be keen to sort of track the leader or allow, he'll be rated back to race alongside at least one other horse. And that's what Ruby seemed to do at Ascot. He was happy just to sort of pop his hurdles, but then asking for a big one at the last when he needed it. And again, as we've seen with the champion hurdle contenders before, when push really comes to shove for these high-class horses, they'll often jump hurdles whatever way they want at cruising speed. But when you come to the last hurdle, that's when you need to ping it. And you need to teach them how to do that in the heat of battle. So I think that's probably what William and Ruby have in mind for him. And in that respect, it's maybe not the best way of buying money. If you're looking to back a very short price runner, you want it to be ridden to maximise his chance of winning. Whereas, of course, connections of Feltham are looking to maximise his chance of winning the champion hurdle. So teaching them lessons along the way and not always getting in a winning position as early as possible. It's still probably be good enough to win anyway, and I agree. I think sign of the victory is the potential one against them. In a strongly run race, if the ground comes good, I'm not sure. I don't think it will, to be honest. It's going to be on the soft side, isn't it? And you may see sign of the victory taken out again. But if he did turn up, then he's the one who's got the gears to serve it up to Feltham, and it'll be an interesting clash. But it's difficult to be against Feltham at this stage.
And Rory, stay with you on your thoughts of the King George chase, the King George VI chase. Sorry, I know you've had your ideas on John Spirit. Hopefully missing this and then coming back for the Ryanair. Would you give him a chance on Saturday? Sorry, on Boxing Day.
He wouldn't be without a chance, but he's not really proven at 3 miles, and it's not the best race. For all you hear people saying every now and again that it's a short 3 miles at Kempton, it's if a 2-miler is ever going to stay 3 miles, it's the track to do it. It doesn't often work out that way, as we've seen in the past. And although John Spirit should stay 3 miles, he's got more chance of staying it properly this season as he's strengthened up. The one thing I didn't want to see with him was him slogging around on bad ground in the middle of winter and maybe bottoming himself before the festival. That's probably not going to be the case in the King George anyway. But it would, and he's not going to be going for handicaps now, is he? After finishing an excellent second of 156 in the Paddy Car, so it makes perfect sense that Connections would give him a go here. His owner won't be around, I understand. His owner spends his winters in New Zealand, I think, and doesn't come back until March. So John Joe said to me earlier in the year, because that'll be out. I said, would you consider just roughing him off for the winter and bringing him back to the festival? And he said, well, that would suit the owner, because he's never here at that time. But clearly, they got to the stage with him where there's not an awful lot of point in protecting his handicap mark anymore. So you might as well go for the big races. I wouldn't be overly keen on his chances here, but we've had some strange King Georges of late, and he does have plenty of talent, so you couldn't rule him out. But John Joe's form is very off-putting, as much as the rising classes.
On official ratings, Champagne Fever's got £16 to find with Silviano Conti. Champagne Fever's probably just a point behind him in the betting. What do you make of the market leader's chance in the?
Is Champagne Fever's rating an Irish rating only, or is the British handicapper giving him a mark?
The British handicap was giving him a mark, obviously, because he's running in the UK. So he rated the 156. He's giving us £2 for Clonmel.
Definitely give him a mark. He's not been entered in the handicap chase, so he wouldn't necessarily have a mark. But I'm guessing that you've checked that, and he has.
Yeah. He's been the official rating's been raised £2 since his winning Clonmel.
Right.
From 156 to 158.
I don't think he'd stay 3 miles. With the answer to that, clearly he's got a lot of upside as a young chaser who's looked a slow developer, and it's a strange thing to say about a horse who's won a champion pumper and then a Supreme Novices Hurdle, but he's looked the shell of the horse that he might turn out to be at some stage. But I think everyone's reading his pedigree and thinking he should stay 3 miles. I've seen absolutely nothing in his style to suggest he'd stay 3. He's out of a Roselier mare, and that is a strong influence for stamina. But it doesn't always work that way, and he just seems best forcing the pace over 2 to 2.5 miles. And I suspect, given that they're trying 3 miles for the first time, they won't be that aggressive with him. I think they're not that aggressive with him. They won't get any performance out of him. I wouldn't touch him with a barge pole.
Dave, we've got you. Who's your likeliest winner on for the King George Kempton?
Ever since the Betfair, really, I've been keen on Menorah. I think Menorah will. I think he's never going to get a better chance to win a King George. The difference with Menorah over his last 3 starts has been his jumping. His jumping as a novice was always an issue. Never seemed to take to it at all. But he looked a different horse at Sandown in April when he thrashed Golden Bearsty. Jumped very, very well that day. In the main, jumped well at Wetherby, apart from a couple of mistakes later on in the contest. But they weren't jolting mistakes. They weren't stopping mistakes like they were as a novice. And he just goes well at Kempton. This is his track. You can scrub his effort last year. He came here with no run last year and was clearly not right. Was nowhere near the horse he should be. Got 2 lengths to find with Sauvignaco Conti on Haydock form. I think round this track, I think he can do that. Round his favourite track, he can do that and continue. The Philip Hobbs juggernaut this season seems to be rolling on. Going to pick up another big prize here. Yeah, Menorah all the way for me.
James, and for you, do you think Paul Nicholls will have a double delight with Sauvignaco Conti here, or is there anything else in the field to give him something to think about?
I think Paul Nicholls. I'd like to think he'll have to win it, but I think it might be Alfaroff. I think he's probably put his best performance over fences in last time at Ascot, when he was ultra impressive and the form's worked out quite well since then, and he would have needed that run. And this season he just seemed flat all last season for some reason. They said it was ulcers in the end. But this time around, King George isn't going to be bottomless, I don't think. I think now he's going to finally run this race over 3 miles, and I think he's a massive danger to Auburn.
And Paul, yourself for the feature on Boxing Day?
I'd agree with Dave. If it continues to dry, I think Menorah's the each way value in the race. To be honest, I think he's been the one. I know he's got a bit of ground to make up with Sauvignaco Conti this year. He's been the consistent one with his 2 runs to date. Conditions should be in his favour. As Dave said, the track, I think that the ground, he's more likely to have a chance of reversing form with Sauvignaco Conti. I don't think there should be as much disparity between the 2 prices. I was talking to Racing FM today about both District and Lexus, and if there is one division that still looks murky to me, and probably a lot of others, it's still the 3 mile chase division, but if I was forced to have a bet on the King George, it would be Menorah each way.
Thanks a lot for that, gents. What we'll do is, hopefully you've had a chance to look over the entries on Boxing Day. I know in the background while he's got Santa's stocking hanging there, so is there any bets out there over the festive period which hopefully people will fill it with chocolate rather than fruit? Roy, any best bets for you on Boxing Day at the moment?
Boxing Day specifically, or including the 27th? Including the
27th.
Yeah.
The festive. Be nice.
There's only 2 horses I can look at in the Welsh National, and therefore they must be betting material. Or I've got it horribly wrong. That's the other possibility. Midnight Prayer is a horse I've had in mind for the best part of a year. I managed to tip him up when he won the National Hunt Chase Anti-Post. I liked him in the Hennessy, and was kicking myself for not realising that he'd be there essentially for a run around. Badly needed the run. Finished last of those to finish, but actually shaped very well and wasn't knocked about, and Alan King was hoping that would put him spot on for Chepstow. So he was top of my anti-post list. But the other horse that appeals is Ben Dance, who I spoke to the owners last week, not specifically about him, but I ended up writing a piece partly about them in the Irish field. And given they've got 3 horses, in training at the moment. Those horses are the new one, Black Lion and Ben Ben's. They might end up at the head of the owners' table come the end of the year. Ben Ben's strikes me as being the type who'll go very well in the Welsh National. I thought he shaped really well at the entry last time, and looks the ideal type in terms of his age and the stage of his development for the Grand National itself. And Nigel Twiston-Davies knows exactly what it takes to produce a national winner, either at Aintree or one of the regional events. So those two are my shortlist for that race, and I think they're 10s and 20s at this stage. So that'll do me nicely. I had a chat with David about this earlier on. We're both reasonably keen in Minori each way. Probably tying the pair up in each way doubles with Minori and the King George, although I still maintain Hugh Card will bounce back to his best at some stage, but I may be banging my head against the wall as far as that one goes. But when he does come back, with the King George in the Gold Cup, I'll be able to say, I told you.
Get off.
Paul, what about yourself over the Christmas period? Anything? Well, I think you've already said the one which sticks out like a sore thumb for yourself.
Yeah, I'll be Stellar Notion on Boxing Day at Kempton. It's gone up £9 for his win at Leicester, but I think big horse. I think he'll expect him to come on a lot for that chase debut, up an extra half mile. I'll be disappointed if 129's the ceiling of his limit this season. I'll be with him, and over in Ireland, hopefully Gil Gamboa will skip a match with Vator at Leopardstown and go to Limerick for a 2 mile 3 graded novice chase. I think he'll take plenty of beating there if he does.
On Stellar Notion's race, I hope see about Tom Simon skips that then if you think that Stellar Notion's still well in. James, yourself over the festive period, anything sticks out?
Well, I like Gil Gamboa a lot, and I think he's probably the most interesting novice chaser. I'm not trained by Mullins, so wherever he goes, I'd be interested. Otherwise, I thought Batavia was really impressive on Friday at Ascot, and he's bound to run under a penalty probably on Boxing Day. I suspect in the Wincanton Temps qualifier, won by Champagne West last season. I suspect it's very, very difficult to beat there. And also, I think Uxis Ondra is still being slightly underrated, and I know he's favourite for the 2 mile chase now and 27th, but I think he's better than anything else in that race and should win it, unless Ballycasey shows marked improvement for the minimum trip. I think he'll be very tough to pass.
Dave, we'll come to you. Hopefully you've got one lined up for Sedgefield, because that's where I might be going. So, anything for Sedgefield? No?
You know what? I've got one, but it's not Sedgefield.
Ah.
When you open up all those gift parties on Christmas Day, all those B&Q, HMV, WH Smith gift parties, all them gift parties you get, sell them to family members for half price, get a tank together, get it all on Delgany Demon in the first at Huntingdon, up to 3 mile 2, he's up another quarter mile, 3 mile 2 furlong. Anything better than even money is your best Christmas present you're going to get.
Well, there you go. Hopefully Dave will be going ho-ho-hoing after
Go on.
the first at Huntingdon. Go on, lads. Right, what we'll do is we'll be back again in between Christmas and New Year just to look back at obviously the action on Boxing Day and the 27th at Kempton and no doubt far and wide, and have a look at the bigger races in the season before we turn off for the New Year. Dave, James, Paul, Roy, thanks for taking your time out this evening and joining us here. No doubt we'll be saying and wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and hopefully a lot of winning punters. Thanks a lot, gent.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, lads.